Hello and welcome to another Mathinator video. This time I will be doing SAT practice test number 9, section number 4, Math with Calculator. And you can find a blank copy of this and download it and print it out for yourself at collegeboard.org. That way you can work the problems out along with me. Because, of course, one of the keys to success with taking the SAT is to practice and practice and practice and make sure you're practicing doing the problems correctly. And one way to do the problems correctly and practice doing them correctly is to do them along with videos like this one right here and the other videos that I have made for the other SAT practice tests that, once again, you can find at collegeboard.org. And another key to success with the SAT and really with any test is to make sure that you read every question carefully. You need to read these questions slowly, carefully, and thoroughly. Make sure you understand what exactly it is asking you to do. Make sure you understand how you know when you have arrived at the correct answer. Take note of what is given to you in the word problem. So as I go through this, I will be reading each question one time, and then as I solve it, I want to talk about different tips, different concepts and skills that are being pointed out in the different problems that they are testing you on. Because, of course, it is really about making sure you are very sharp in your math knowledge and a wide range of math skills. That is how you can ensure that you will get the highest possible score. Okay, that's enough of an intro. Let's go ahead and get into this. What value of x satisfies the equation 3x plus 3 equals 27? So straight out the blocks, we have just a straightforward solving a linear equation. 3x plus 3 equals 27. So that means 3x equals 24, so that x equals 8. All right. 2 units of length used in ancient Egypt were cubits and palms, where 1 cubit is equivalent to 7 palms. The Great Sphinx statue in Giza is approximately 140 cubits long. Which of the following best approximates the length in palms of the Great Sphinx statue? So what we've got here is a proportion. All right, we're comparing cubits to palms. So we have 1 cubit is 7 palms. And we're talking about the Great Sphinx is 140 cubits. So how many palms is that? Well, we see from 1 to 140, we're multiplying by 140. That means in our denominator, we have to multiply 7 times 140. And without even using our magic math machine, we can see that 7 times 140 is definitely not going to be 0.0520 or 140. That only leaves us with D. And yes, if you go ahead and multiply 7 times 140, you will get 980. If 2n divided by 5 equals 10, what is the value of 2n minus 1? Take note that our given is 2n, and what they're asking us to find contains 2n. So we want to keep 2n there all nice and stay together. All right, so if 2n divided by 5 equals 10, that means 2n equals 50. Well, whatever we do to one side, we have to do to the other. So 2n minus 1 is going to equal 50 minus 1, which we know is 49. Answer choice B. Okay, square root of x squared equals x. Which of the following values of x is not a solution to the equation above? All right, when we're talking about these radicals here, over on that right side, in this case, we're talking about the principal square root. So the principal square root is a positive number, and the only one of those positive choice, or the only one of those choices that is not a positive number is the negative 4. Answer choice A. Temperature of a cup of coffee during an experiment. In an experiment, a heated cup of coffee is removed from a heat source, and the cup of coffee is then left in a room that is kept at a constant temperature. The graph above shows the temperature in degrees Fahrenheit of the coffee immediately after being removed from the heat source and at 10-minute intervals thereafter. Of the following, which best approximates the temperature in degrees Fahrenheit of the coffee when it is first removed from the heat source? So this is about properly interpreting what it's asking us here. First removed from the heat source, since we're talking about 10-minute intervals, first removed from the heat source is time t0, which is our y-intercept, and we see our y-intercept is up there about 195. Answer choice D. During which of the following 10-minute intervals does the temperature of the coffee decrease at the greatest average rate? So if we're talking about decreasing at the greatest average rate, that means we're looking for the greatest slope, the greatest downhill slope. And we can see that the greatest downhill slope is right here in the first 10 minutes. Between 0 and 10 minutes, answer choice A. All right. In the figure above, line segment AD intersects line segment BE at C. If x equals 100, what is the value of y? So we have a good old geometry problem here. We know each triangle has to sum to 180 degrees. So if that's 20 and it tells us that x is 100, that means we have 120 degrees between those two angles. So this angle right here has to be 60 degrees. Next thing we're going to do is go to our vertical angle theorem. Actually, no, we don't need to go to our vertical angle theorem. Or, well, we have a choice here. So let's pause and look at what we've got. Because when we're solving this, or when I solve these, there are different ways to solve them. There's more than one way. I'm not saying that the way I do it is the only way or the best way. I try to come up with the quickest way, but sometimes it just depends on how my brain works and what I see when I look at these problems. All right, so if we go with the vertical angle theorem, that means this has to be 60 degrees right here. So we have 60 and 40, which means y has to be 80 degrees to make the 180. Now, the other thing I was looking at there is that since that's 60 degrees, I know that we have a straight angle right here. So if that's 60, this has to be 120 degrees. And by the exterior angle theorem, that 120 equals the sum of those two angles right there. So 120 equals 40 plus y. Again, y is 80 degrees. The line graphed in the xy plane below models the total cost in dollars for a cab ride y in a certain city during non-peak hours based on the number of miles traveled, x. According to the graph, what is the cost for each additional mile traveled in dollars of a cab ride? All right, so it's asking you what is the slope. All right, the cost for each additional mile, cost per mile, that is the slope. We have distance and cost, so we need to measure the slope here. And when we're doing that, we always need to make sure our scales are the same, or check our scales. So our scales are equal here. All right, 1 block is 1 unit. So if we go here, let's see, we got a rise of 2, a run of 1. So 2 to 1, that means it is $2 for each mile. A, answer choice A. On Tuesday, a local gas station had 135 customers. The table above summarizes whether or not the customers on Tuesday purchased gasoline, a beverage, both, or neither. Based on the data in the table, what is the probability that a gas station customer selected at random on that day did not purchase gasoline? Okay, when we're talking about probability and we're given tables of people and what they did or didn't do, the denominator is going to be the larger population that we're drawing from, the larger pool that we're drawing from. And it says a customer selected at random. So there are no specifications on that. So that means we're talking about all of the customers, so that's all 135. And just by looking at that, D is the only one that has 135 in the denominator. But let's continue on. So out of that 135, selected at random, did not purchase gasoline. All right, so out of those who did not purchase gasoline, now that is the smaller specific group. It is these two right here, or we've got this right here. 50 did not purchase gasoline. So it's the 50 out of 135, and we had already established that D is the correct answer. Washington High School randomly selected freshmen, sophomore, junior, and senior students for a survey about potential changes to next year's schedule. Of students selected for the survey, 1/4 were freshmen and 1/3 were sophomores. Half of the remaining selected students were juniors. If 336 students were selected for the survey, how many were seniors? All right, so this is one, we got to make sure we are reading this thoroughly and carefully. What are we given? We're given 1/4, 1/3, and 336. Those are the numbers given. So we're trying to figure out how many seniors, so we need to add all of these up, and they will all add up to 336. All right, so what do we know? We know 1/4 were freshmen. So we know 1/4 of 336 were freshmen, so we have 84 freshmen. And 1/3 were sophomores. So 112 sophomores. And now it says we've got 84 freshmen. Plus 112 sophomores. Plus, now it says half the remaining selected students were juniors. So plus 1/2. Well, what is the remaining? Well, the remaining is 336 minus 84 plus 112. So minus 196, which is 140. So plus 1/2 of 140 plus S equals 336. So that is, we already said 84 plus 112 is 196 plus 70 plus S equals 336. So now we know that is 276 plus S equals 336, giving us S equals 70. 70 seniors. Answer choice D. Okay. Plant A is currently 20 centimeters tall, and plant B is currently 12 centimeters tall. The ratio of the heights of plant A to plant B is equal to the ratio of the heights of plant C to plant D. If plant C is 54 centimeters tall, what is the height of plant D in centimeters? Okay, so we are tells us we got a ratio, so let's set up a proportion because it tells us that A is to B as C is to D. So now we're given A is 20, B is 12, and that is in the same ratio. Plant C is 54, and we'll just put to D. All right, so we know, let's look at this. Let's do some mental math here. 54 divided by 2 is 27. So 54 divided by 20 is 2.7. So we're multiplying 20 times 2.7 to get 54. We need to multiply 12 times 2.7 to get D. Well, 12 times 2.7 definitely is not 90. All right, 12 times 5 is 60, so 12 times 2.7 is not going to be 62. 12 times 3 is 36, so 12 times 2.7 is definitely not going to be 44. There we go. All right. We could have just started off with A and said we're looking for a number that's going to be a little less than 36. Biologists found a new species of pale shrimp at the world's deepest undersea vent, the BB Vent Field. The vent is 3.1 miles below the sea's surface. Approximately how many kilometers below the sea surface is the vent? And we are given that 1 kilometer is approximately 0.214 miles. 0.6214 miles. Okay. So it looks like we've got another proportion set up here. We know that 1 kilometer is to 0.6214 miles, and we're talking about 3.1 miles is how many kilometers? All right, and that's going to give us 3.1 equals 0.6214 km. And now we're going to divide 3.1 by 0.6214. So let's get our handy dandy magic math machine. Wait a minute. Before we get our calculator, again, let's look at some mental math. We have 3.1, and we're going to divide it by a number that is less than 1. So anytime we are dividing by a number less than 1, our result is going to be bigger than the number we started with. Let's use some mathematical terms. 3.1 is our dividend. 0.6214 is our divisor. So anytime our divisor is less than 1, the result, the quotient is going to be greater than the dividend we start with. All right, so that rules out 2 and 3. So is the answer going to be 4 or 5? Well, again, let's look at some mental math. 3/5, 3 divided by 5 is 0.6. So 3.1, all right, so if I say it the other way, 3 divided by 0.6 is 5. So 3.1 divided by 0.6214 is going to be about 5. right? And again, we can verify with our calculator. A cargo helicopter delivers only 100-pound packages and 120-pound packages. For each delivery trip, the helicopter must carry at least 10 packages, and the total weight of the packages can be at most 1,100 pounds. What is the maximum number of 120-pound packages that the helicopter can carry per trip? All right, so we need to recognize this as a system of two linear inequalities. All right, so the helicopter must carry, at least. So at least means greater than or equal to. And let's say we've got 100-pound packages, call those H, and 120-pound packages, we'll call those T. So 100 plus 120 at least is going to be greater than or equal to 10. And the total weight can be at most, so that means less than or equal to. All right, so we have 100-pound packages, so each of those packages is 100 pounds times the number, which we don't know, plus 120 times T, that is going to be less than or equal to 1,100. Now, since we are looking for 120-pound packages, let's eliminate the 100-pound packages and get everything in terms of T. And for this, we're going to drop the greater than and just say H is equal to 10 minus T. And that will give us 100H and everything in terms of T. So 110 minus T plus 120T less than or equal to 1,100. So we got 1,000 minus 10T plus 120T less than or equal to 1,100. I left off a 0 there. That should be minus 100T. All right, there we go. And that is going to give us 20T is less than or equal to 100. So at most, we got T is going to be less than or equal to 5. Answer choice C. A company purchased a machine valued at $120,000. The value of the machine depreciates by the same amount each year, so that after 10 years, the value will be $30,000. Which of the following equations gives the value V of the machine in dollars T years after it was purchased for 0 less than or equal to T less than or equal to 10? Okay, let's piece together what we're given. All right, so the machine is valued at $120,000. It depreciates by the same amount each year. So depreciate by the same amount each, that means we have a negative slope. All right. So right away, and since we're talking about value in terms of time, T years, we're looking for something that has a negative, let's do it this way. Y equals mx plus b. So we're looking for something that has a negative slope. So which one has a negative slope? That means we can eliminate C. That has a positive slope. The next thing we're looking at, what is the 30,000? Well, the 30,000 is the value after 10 years, so that's definitely not going to be the slope. All right. So now between A and B. Well, again, what is the 30,000? The 30,000 is the value after 10 years. And our plus B, our constant there, has got to be the value that it starts off, the value at time 0. And the value at time 0 is 120,000. So that means we are left to answer choice B. Line M in the XY plane contains the points 2, 4, and 0, 1. Which of the following is an equation of the line M, or of line M? All right, so we need to recognize something very quickly. Math eyes. Math eyes is what term I use. Now, 0, 1. All right, 0, 1, where x is 0, that gives us our y-intercept. The y-coordinate when x is 0 is our y-intercept. And the only answer choice that has 1 as the y-intercept is D. And just like that, we're done. All right, you could have figured out the slope and then gone to the point slope formula. But again, recognizing that y-intercept is given there, brought us directly to the answer very quickly. All right, 4x plus 4 times ax minus 1 minus x squared plus 4. In the expression above, a is a constant. If the expression is equivalent to bx, where b is a constant, what is the value of b? All right, so this one, kind of strange, kind of figure out, okay, how do I get started? How do I get started? Well, we need to go ahead and multiply everything through. So we're going to have 4ax squared minus 4x plus 4ax minus 4 minus x squared plus 4, and that expression equals bx. All right, so looking at what we've got going on here, let's group some terms together. And that negative 4 and plus 4, those sum to 0. And let's see, what we want to try to do here is get our x terms together and our x squared terms together. All right, so let's go. We've got 4ax squared minus x squared minus 4x plus 4ax. And that's still equal to bx. All right, now we can factor out. If we factor out an x squared, we have 4a minus 1. And then if we factor out an x, well, actually we can factor out a 4x. Or we can factor out a negative 4x. That gives us 1 minus 4a. And actually, let's change that to 4ax minus 4. That way, when we factor out a 4x, we're left with a minus 1. And that equals bx. Now, here's where it gets kind of tricky, or certain things you have to recognize. On the right side, there is no x squared term. There's only an x. So that means the coefficient on x squared is 0. So 4a minus 1 equals 0. Giving us 4a equals 1. And so knowing that 4a equals 1, that means a equals 1/4. And so that gives us, well, 4 times 1/4, since a is 1/4, 4 times 1/4 minus 1 equals b. All right, because we're looking at the coefficient on x is the 4 times a minus 1. And that gives us 1/4 minus 1 is negative 3/4 times 4, so negative 3 equals b. That one was kind of lengthy, but it was a good one. All right. If 2w plus 4t equals 14 and 4w plus 5t equals 25, what is the value of 2w plus 3t? Okay, looking at what we've got going on, we want to know the value of 2w, and looking at this, I see I have 2w and I have 4w. So that gets me to thinking. All right, so we got 4w plus 5t equals 25, and 2w plus 4t equals 14. So if I subtract these two equations, that gives me 2w plus t equals 11. And now let's leave a little space there. 2w plus t equals 11, and 2w plus 4t equals 14. All right, so since we're talking about linear, everything's linear because there's no squares, the exponents are all 1, we could do some incremental thinking, I'll call it. 2w plus t equals 11 and 2w plus 4t equals 14. That means we're going from 11 to 14, that's 3 steps. We're going from 1t to 4t, that's also 3 steps. So we can say that 2w plus 2t equals 12. So 2w plus 3t is going to equal 14. 13, that is. I don't know what's wrong with me right now. 13. Answer choice C. But let's look at one other thing before we go on. If 2w plus t equals 11, all right, and 2w plus 4t equals 14, let's look at something. Let's look at some good mathematical manipulation here. All right, so think about this. It'll really help you out in the future. All right, so I know that 2w plus 4t equals 14. Well, 2w plus 4t is just 2w plus t plus 3t. All right, so we just take that 4t and split it up into t plus 3t. That equals 14. And I already know that 2w plus t equals 11. So 11 plus 3t equals 14. So that gives us 3t equals 3, so that t equals 1. Now this is turning out to be longer than I thought it would be. All right, so now I know 2w plus t, but t is 1, plus 3t equals 14, so that 2w plus 3t equals 13. All right. Okay, Jennifer bought a box of Crunchy Grain cereal. The nutrition facts on the box state that a serving size of the cereal is 3/4 of a cup and provides 210 calories, 50 of which are calories from fat. In addition, each serving of the cereal provides 180 milligrams of potassium, which is 5% of the daily allowance for adults. If P% of an adult's daily allowance of potassium is provided by X servings of Crunchy Grain cereal per day, which of the following expresses P in terms of X? All right, so everything here is linear. So we can eliminate our exponential functions here. And so now P percent in terms of X, so percent potassium. So for each serving it's 5%, but it says P is percent. So P is going to equal 5x. Again, we got to keep in mind it says if P percent. All right. B. On Tuesday, Jennifer will mix Crunchy Grain cereal with Super Grain cereal for her breakfast. Super Grain cereal provides 240 calories per cup. If the total number of calories in 1 cup of Jennifer's mixture is 270, how much Super Grain cereal is in 1 cup of the mixture? All right, we need to recognize that what we have here is a system of 2 linear equations. All right, we've got Crunchy Grain cereal and Super Grain cereal. So let's say we've got Crunchy Grain and Super Grain. And it says we're looking at 1 cup of the mixture. So Crunchy Grain plus Super Grain, that is going to equal 1 cup in her breakfast. Now, here's where it gets a little tricky. It tells us that Super Grain is 240 calories per cup, but Crunchy Grain is 210 calories per 3/4 cup. So just follow me here. That means we want to take 210 and divide it by 3. All right, so 210 divided by 3. Since it's 210 calories in 3/4 cup, that means it's going to be 70 calories per 1/4 cup. So that in turn is going to be equal to 280 calories per full cup for the Crunchy Grain cereal. And now we can say 280 calories per cup times the number of cups of Crunchy Grain plus 240 calories per cup times the number of cups of Super Grain equals 270 calories in her breakfast that morning. Or per 1 cup serving, we could say. All right, now since we're looking for Super Grain cereal, let's get everything in terms of S. So C is going to be equal to 1 minus S. And that is going to give us 280 times 1 minus S plus 240S equals 270. So 280 minus 280S plus 240S equals 270. and that is going to give us negative 40s equals negative 10, so that S equals 1/4 cup. Answer choice B. Which of the following could be the graph of the number of calories from fat in a crunchy grain cereal as a function of the 3/4 cup servings of the cereal? Well, again, let's go back and say calories from fat. All right, 50 calories of fat per 3/4 cup. So as we increase the number of 3/4 cup servings, the calories of fat is not going to stay the same, and it's not going to decrease. All right. So we know it's going to be an increasing function, and we got to look at our y-intercept. At 0 3/4 cup servings, that means the calories from fat is 0 because there's nothing there. So it is going to be A. B says, if you're assuming right here that is the 50 calories from fat, that is saying there's 50 calories of fat in a 0 cup serving, or in 0 3/4 cup servings. All right. The graph of the exponential function h in the xy plane, where y equals h of x, has a y-intercept of d, where d is a positive constant. Which of the following could define the function h? All right, let's look at this here. Since it tells us we have an exponential function, we can eliminate b, that's a linear function. We can eliminate c, that is a power function. And now let's look at, it says it has a y-intercept of d. The y-intercept is the y value when x equals 0. So we have to understand our exponential functions here. There's our y-intercept. All right. And we are looking for h of 0 equals d. All right, so if we put 0 in for x, this is where we need to know our rules of exponents. In A, if we put 0 in for x, then h of 0 equals negative 3. In D, if we put 0 in for x, then h of 0 equals d. Because it tells us that d is a positive constant. Any positive constant raised to the 0 power equals 1. So again, in A, if we put d to the 0 power, that's negative 3 times 1. And in D, if we put 0 in for x, now we have 3 to the 0 power equals 1, so h of 0 equals d. The weights in pounds for 15 horses in a stable were reported, and the mean, median, range, and standard deviation for the data were found. The horse with the lowest reported weight was found to actually weigh 10 pounds less than its reported weight. What value remains unchanged if the 4 values are reported using the corrected weight? All right, so let's look at this right here. We've got x1, x2, x3, so on and so on and so on, up to x15. And what we found out is that x1 was wrong. It's actually 10 pounds less. So let's go ahead and take that out and say now we're going to replace that with x1 prime. All right, so if x1 prime is actually 10 pounds less, we know that's going to change the mean. We know it's going to change the range because the range is the difference between the greatest value and the smallest value. So if the smallest value changes by 10 pounds, our range is going to change by 10 pounds. I skipped over median for a reason. All right, now what is not going to change? Since we're talking about 15 values, the middle value is going to be x8. And we can see that changing the first value is not going to change x8, so the median is going to stay the same. And of course, we can logically conclude that, of course, the standard deviation is going to change because that value that goes into computing standard deviation changed by 10. Near the end of a U.S. cable news show, the host invited viewers to respond to a poll on the show's website that asked, "Do you support the new federal policy discussed during the show?" At the end of the show, the host reported that 28% responded yes and 70% responded no. Which of the following best explains why the results are unlikely to represent the sentiments of the population of the United States? All right, so here we have a case where not only do we have to carefully read the question, we need to carefully read each one of our answer choices. The percentages do not add up to 100%, so any possible conclusions from the poll are invalid. That is not, a good explanation for the results, because often the percentages do not add up to 100 because there's margin of error, and there's some who have no opinion or whatever. I don't care, maybe. So those type of people. So that's why it's not always going to add up to 100. B, those responded to the poll were not a random sample of the population of the United States. Now, well, the poll is only for the viewers of that cable news show. So we can say, hey, they probably, well, it's not a random sample because the sample, again, was only those who watched the news show. There were not 50% yes responses and 50% no responses. Well, that's, that doesn't explain anything because, of course, you're not always going to get a 50-50 split. The show did not allow viewers enough time to respond to the poll. Well, we don't know how much time they were given. So again, it does bring it back to the fact that because it was only a poll of the people who watched the show, and so of course only people on the show would have known, hey, I need to go to that website. So again, it was not a random sample. A lot of bias there. If f of x equals 5x squared minus 3 and f of x plus a equals 5x squared plus 30x plus 42, what is the value of a? All right, so we're working with functions here, and we've got to look at the fact, since we're going from f of x to f of x plus a, so f of x plus a means, of course, we're going to put x plus a wherever we see x in our original function. So that means we're looking at 5x plus a squared minus 3. And we want that to equal 5x squared plus 30x plus 42. All right, so that is going to give us 5 times x squared. You need to know how to do binomial expansion. X squared plus 2ax plus a squared minus 3. And so now that is be 5x squared plus 10ax plus 5a squared minus 3. And now, how are we going to find the value of a? Well, when we set it equal to our trinomial over there, that means our coefficients have to be equal for each one of our terms, meaning that 10ax, all right, so we've got 10ax equals 30x, so that 10a equals 30, meaning a has to equal 3. If sine x degrees equals a, which of the following must be true for all values of x? And I'll tell you, I've seen cofunctions come up several times in doing these practice tests. And our cofunction identity tells us that sine of x degrees equals cosine of 90 minus x degrees. So now, if sine x degrees equals a, and sine x degrees equals cosine of 90 minus x degrees, then our transitive property tells us that cosine 90 minus x degrees also equals a, answer choice C. H of x equals negative 16x squared plus 100x plus 10. The quadratic function above models the height above the ground, h, in feet, of a projectile x seconds after it had been launched vertically. If y equals h of x is graphed in the xy plane, which of the following represents the real-life meaning of the positive x-intercept of the graph? All right, so we've got height versus time. All right, the initial height of the projectile. Well, when we're looking at quadratic motion of projectiles, the initial height is the y-intercept because it's when x equals 0, initial height, y-intercept. Okay, the maximum height of the projectile. Well, the maximum height is not going to be an x-intercept, because our maximum height, if we look at x and y, the maximum height is going to be somewhere up here. Definitely not the x-intercept. It's going to be well above the x-axis. All right, the time at which the projectile reaches its maximum height. Well, we've already established that the x-intercept has nothing to do with the maximum height, so that rules out C. D has to be the answer. But again, let's look at it. The time at which the projectile hits the ground. Yes, that is the x-intercept. As it goes launched, it is possible to have a negative x-intercept when we look at launch. That negative is meaningless to us. And so then at this time, all right, it hits the ground, x-intercept. In the xy plane, the graph of the polynomial function f crosses the x-axis at exactly 2 points, a0 and b0, where a and b are both positive. Which of the following could define f? So in here we're looking at polynomial functions and the factored form of polynomial functions. So the factored form, when we look at the fact of our crossing the x-axis or the x-intercepts are the solutions, the roots, the zeros of the function. All right. And the relationship between the x-intercepts and the factor form of the function is that we want to take the x value of our x-intercept, change the sign in front of it, group it with x, and that gives us the factored form. All right, so since our x-intercepts are positive a and positive b, that means the factored form is going to be x minus a, we change the sign and group it with x to make a binomial, and x minus b. So that is a. If y equals 3x squared plus 6x plus 2 is graphed in the xy plane, which of the following characteristics of the graph is displayed as a constant or coefficient in the equation? Okay, the y-coordinate of the vertex. Well, that is not displayed in this equation because this is not the vertex form. The x-intercepts. Well, the only way we know the x-intercepts is we have to factor it. So this does not give us the x-intercepts. The y-intercept. Is the y-intercept displayed in the equation? Yes, it is, because the y-intercept is the value when x equals 0. So it's the constant at the end that is the y-intercept when we're talking about quadratic functions. Just like when we have a linear function, y equals mx plus b, that constant at the end is our y-intercept. And of course, the x-intercept of the line of symmetry, no, that is not displayed in the equation. The scatter plot above shows the federal mandated minimum wage every 10 years between 1940 and 2010. A line of best fit is shown, and its equation is y equals 0.096x minus 0.488. What does the line of best fit predict about the increase in the minimum wage over the 70-year period? All right. Each year between 1940 and 2010, the average increase in minimum wage was $0.096. Now, all right, so looking at our graph, we've got wage, dollars per hour, per year, all right, for the years. If we look at our slope there, the slope is the rate of increase, the average increase. So we can say it is A. But again, I like to look at our other choices. Each year between 1940 and 2010, the average increase in minimum wage was $0.49. Well, no, that is a constant, so that is not the average of the increase. That is not a rate of increase. Every 10 years between 1940 and 2010, the average increase in minimum wage was $0.096. Now, it tells us that it's giving data for every 10 years, but we've got to see, remember that our slope is the rate per year, in this case, dollars per year. So it is not C. And again, for the combined reasons of B and C, D is not correct. So each year, we have a $0.096 increase each year. The scatter plot above shows a company's ice cream sales D in dollars and the high temperature T in degrees Celsius on 12 different days. A line of best fit for the data is also shown. Which of the following could be an equation for the line of best fit? All right, so let's look at what we have here. And this one is a little tricky because it starts at temperature T. So if we extend this line, we can see that, all right, at 10, all right, at temperature 10, we're looking at sales of about $400. Again, we're in degrees Celsius. So we can rule out A and B, because 402 is not the, what was I saying here? Is not the y-intercept. It is not the sales at temperature, or yeah, at temperature 0. It's the sales around temperature 10. All right, so we can kind of, well, we don't know. We don't know. Let's go ahead. The next thing we want to do is look at the slope. And we see that they both have the same slope. Now let's find a good point here, and a good one, it looks like we're about 2750. All right, and we've got a slope of 33. So let's go ahead and say y minus y1 equals m x minus x1, and that is 20 right there, giving us y minus 750 equals 33x minus 660. All right, 33 times 20, 660. And so that comes out to y equals 33x plus 90. And again, dealing with the fact that we had to do an estimate, all right, that's close enough for comfort here to say that we're looking at 33x, or in this case, actually 33t plus 84. And that brings us to the end of our multiple choice portion, on to our free response. Okay. In the xy plane above, the circle has center hk and radius 10. What is the value of k? All right, so we have a good geometry problem here. We have a radius of 10, so that's going to be 10, that's going to be 10. And from 4 to 20 is 16. Now the thing with this is, here is we can drop a perpendicular, and dropping that perpendicular is going to bisect that chord right there. So that now we're looking at 8 and 8. And k is going to equal that height there. All right, so we've dropped the perpendicular. Now hopefully you recognize, hey, we're going to have a 3, 4, 5 triangle situation going on, because we have 8. 8 divided by 2 is 4. 10, our hypotenuse divided by 2 is 5. So the ratio there is going to be 6 times, well, yeah, 6. 3 times 2, so 6. K is going to be 6. In the xy plane, line L has a y-intercept of negative 13 and is perpendicular to the line with the equation y equals negative 2/3 x. If the point 10b is on line L, what is the value of b? Okay, let's examine what we're given. Line L has a y-intercept of negative 13. Line L is perpendicular to the line with the equation y equals negative 2/3 x. So that tells us the slope, all right, are perpendicular lines, the slopes are negative reciprocals. So that means the slope of line L is going to be positive 3/2. And we know the slope, we know the y-intercept is negative 13, so that means the equation of line L is y equals 3/2 x minus 13. Now we just want to substitute to find out what b is. So that we have b, not to be confused with the y-intercept in y equals mx plus b. So that coordinate b is going to equal 3/2 times that 10 minus 13, and that is equal to 15 minus 13. So b equals 2. Human blood can be classified into 4 common blood types: A, B, AB, and O. It is also characterized by the presence plus or absence negative of the rhesus factor. The table above shows the distribution of blood type and rhesus factor for a group of people. If one of these people who is rhesus negative is chosen at random, the probability that the person has blood type B is 1/9. What is the value of X? All right, so when we're talking about probability, okay, let's set this up. Probability, that means our denominator is going to be the sum of the larger pool that we're pulling from. All right. So we're looking at the people who are rhesus negative. So we're only looking at these people right here. That is the pool we're pulling from. And so that's 7 plus 2 plus 1. All right, so that is 10 plus x. All right, and if a person there is, what is the probability if the person has blood type B is 9? One of these people whose rhesus negative is chosen at random. Okay, we got that. The probability that the person has blood type B is 1/9. What is the value of x? So now the specific group out of that pool that we're pulling from is our numerator, and that is 2. All right, so that probability, so we've got 2 divided by 10 plus x equals 1/9. All right, so we're in ratio here. Now we could cross multiply and get 18 equals 10 plus x, or we could just say, hey, since 2 is twice as much as 1, 10 plus x has to be twice as much as 9. So 10 plus x has to equal 18, meaning x equals 8. All right, number of goals scored by a soccer team in 29 games. Based on the graph above, in how many of the games played did the soccer team score goals equal to the median number of goals for the 29 games? All right, so this is a wording interpretation problem here. All right, so the first thing we need to do as we look at this, all right, so again, let's look at in how many of the games played did the soccer team score goals equal to the median number of goals. So let's first of all find out what is the median number of goals for the 29 games. All right, so since 29 is an odd number, we're going to have a true median, or our median is going to be the true middle. So we're looking for value number 15. And we have a histogram, and histograms are all about frequency. All right, so let me see. So in the first 8 games, there were 8 games in which 1 goal was scored, and then 9 games in which 2 goals were scored. So that means the 15th value, or the 15th game, is in there. So 2 goals scored. And now, in how many games were 2 goals scored? 9. Okay, so let me give a little bit more just in case you're wondering. All right, 29 games. The median is the middle number. So the middle number of 29 is going to be the 15th value, because that means you're going to have 14 before and 14 after. And because histograms are based on frequency, all right, we see the number of goals scored and how many games in which those were scored. In 8 games, 1 goal was scored. In 9 games, 2 goals were scored. So that takes us up to game 17. So game 15 had the 15th value is 2 goals scored. All right, let's keep it moving. Gisela would owe $15,500 in sales tax each year if she were not eligible for any tax deductions. This year, Gisela is eligible for tax deductions that reduce the amount of taxes she owes by $2,325. If these tax deductions reduce the taxes Gisela owes this year by D%, what is the value of D? Okay, so let's look at what we've got going on. So it says the tax deductions reduce the amount of tax she owes by $2,325. And we want to know what is the value of D, because they reduce the taxes by D%. All right, so we want to take $2,325 divided by $15,500, and that equals 0.15. All right, so they reduce the taxes by D%. So what is the value of D? Well, that's 0.15, but that is 15%. So the value of D is 15. All right, 3/4 x minus 1/2 y equals 12, ax minus by equals 9. The system of equations above has no solutions. If a and b are constants, what is the value of a divided by b? So here we need to understand what is meant by saying that the system has no solutions. That means the coefficients on a and b are the same, or the coefficients a and b are the same as the coefficients 3/4 and 1/2. All right. So that is, whenever we have a system of 2 equations, if there's no solution, that means the coefficients, should have said it this way from the jump, the coefficients on x and y have to be the same in both equations. All right, so now that tells us that A is 3/4 and B is 1/2. So A divided by B is 3/4 divided by 1/2, which is equal to 3/4 times 2 divided by 1. The 2's divide out, and that is 3/2, or 1.5. Okay, the table above shows the number of international tourist arrivals rounded to the nearest tenth of a million to the top 9 tourist destinations in both 2012 and 2013. Based on the information given in the table, how much greater in millions was the median number of international tourist arrivals to the top 9 tourist destinations in 2013 than the median number in 2012 to the nearest tenth of a million? All right, so we're looking at here for 9 tourist destinations, so that means the median number is going to be the middle number when the numbers are written in numerical order, and they are in numerical order from the bottom up. So the fifth one, since we're talking about 9 values, the fifth one, 4 before, 4 after, so that is 46.4 in 2012, and in 2013, they're not exactly in numerical order, but still Italy is the median, so we're looking at 47.4, 47.7 that is, minus 46.4, and that is 1.3. The number of international tourist arrivals in Russia in 2012 was 13.5% greater than in 2011. The number of international tourist arrivals in Russia was K million more in 2012 than in 2011. What is the value of K to the nearest integer? All right, well, the number of international tourist arrivals in Russia in 2012, 13.5% greater than 2011. That means 2012, that 24.7 is 1.135 times 2011. And let's just call that R. So that gives us R is approximately, I should use the approximate instead of equals, but anyway, 21.76. Round that to 21.8. And so that gives us 24.7 minus 21.8. That equals 2.9. And to the nearest integer, that is 3. And hopefully you understand why I did that 1.135. So 2012 was what was there in 2011 plus 13.5% of that number. So that is where we get the 1.135. Okay, looks like we're done with this one here. Keep practicing, and I wish you the best.